Going live.
Tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello everybody, Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, coming at you live all the way from beautiful North Texas outside of Gordonville. Pond Boss World Headquarters here. Great day today in the upper 50s, I think. We're on our way to the 60s. You know, after bottoming out around 24, 25, it sounds like a kind of a Texas sort of winter. Got some thoughts I want to share with you tonight. Of course, I got to do what I do here, kind of figure out how I can see you guys and see your questions. You guys know the drill. Pond Boss Magazine. There's Troy Todd checking in. John Mikulik. Hi, guys. Good to see you. Debbie Dobbs, Lusk, my girlfriend. Come home, honey. I'm ready for you. Miss you, babe. Debbie, actually, you know what? Debbie's been hanging out up in South Dakota with Susie Willis, our dear friend Dave Willis's widow, and helping her do a few things and get some things done up there. She's been there a week. So she left on Valentine's Day. Who does that? My wife. Frank James, Dick Tabbert, good to see you guys. Pond Boss Magazine, do me a favor. You know the drill. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comment section. Click like and go ahead and share this video to your timeline if you don't mind. That's how we play the game. So I'm going to see if I can find it on my laptop because it's a whole lot easier to see you guys. If I can find it on my laptop, I can see the questions a lot easier. Oh, there it is right there. Holy cow. There we go. Troy Todd, John Mikulik, Chuck Brinkman. Hey, Chuck, checking in from Missouri. Daniel Hendrick. Let's see who else we got here. Danny Mack came in from the bar on a Wednesday night to hang out with us. That's pretty cool. Mike Cottrell. Guys, if you will do all those things, I just ask you, click like, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine, share the video. You'll be eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat. Look at that. Pretty cool, huh? And a mug. Keeps hot things hot, cold things cold, and I don't know how it knows the difference. Susie Willis, check it out. She's hanging out with my girlfriend. You know, I thought tonight what I'd do is talk about some topics. Oh, John Funk checking in from Michigan. John, you sent me a really long email, man. I appreciate the kind words, and I think I responded back. You know, so matter of fact, I know I did. I've answered a bunch of emails in the last 3 or 4 days. I've kind of been holed up and just kind of rocking and rolling through some reports and proposals and things like that. So my wife says, what are you looking at? Only she just sent me a private message, and I'm not even sure she knows how she did it. Let's see. Oh, look at that. She just put it in a private message. Fred Bingaman. Good to see Fred. You know what I thought I'd do tonight is tell you some stories. These are all real stories, and every one I'm going to tell you has just happened within a week. Just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that goes on in the life of Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss. There's Bev Root checking in from Lake Vilbig. Hi, Bev. Good to see you, honey. I miss your husband, and I know you do. Good man. So there's several stories in there. I think every one of them is applicable to you in one way or another. So I'm going to kind of take them one at a time. And if you've got questions, type them in, and I'll be happy to answer them best I can if I know the answer. And if I don't, then I'll make something up. No, not really. I'll give you an answer. You might not like it, but I will. I want to tell you, I got a referral. This is pretty funny. I got a referral from a friend of mine that's got a pond management company over in South Carolina. And a lady from Texas called him. And she found him online. And actually, I think she found him from a Pond Boss ad that was online. She called him, Wade Bales, who's got a property over there. By the way, listen to this. Listen to me. Smartfish app. Look up Smartfish app. You're going to want that. That's part of what Wade has done, is created a Smartfish app. Jim Liner made it home. Ryan Barrett. Alex Short. Ryan's asking me, are there other catfish besides channel catfish good for a pond? Yeah, blue cats are pretty good. If you like huge fish, they'll eat all the rest of your fish. I mean, if you really want to grow a gigantic fish, catfish, blue cats are your choice. Now, they'll eat fish food, but they're kind of also a Grey Poo pond. They'll eat all your fish, too. I actually captured a 52-pound blue cat one time that had a 3-pound bass in his belly. So if that's okay with you, that's okay with me. I see Leanne checking in. Trina Madonna's checking in. Willie Howe, my next door neighbor, must be bored to be listening to me. Hi, Willie. Good to see you, man. Let's see. Frank James, any stories of people using predator netting to protect their fish from cormorants? Pluses and minuses. Yeah. I've got all kinds of stories about people using netting. The thing about netting is, first of all, you're dealing with an endangered species. So you got to keep that in mind. You're not supposed to disrupt them at all. You know, most of the folks that try to dissuade them make sure that they have plenty of dense habitat, cover structure under the water so the fish can hide in it, or they spook them off with loud noises, which only happens on occasion, because those fish, those birds, it's hard to keep them off. Now, bird netting around hatcheries can get permits to protect their crop, but I'll explain this. A cormorant, a double-crested cormorant, is going to land on the water, dive under the water, eat a fish. When it comes up, if it has a reason to leave, like you scare it or whatever, it's going to take off, run across the water as it's flapping its wings, and it's got to have a long runway to get out of the water. So it knows that. So it won't land on water where it doesn't have a good way to take off. Now, I tell you what I've done in the past with my smaller ponds. I've taken some rebar, driven it in the ground, and taken nylon string, pretty heavy nylon string, and just run it back and forth across the pond, in a zigzag pattern about 18 inches off the water. And that really disrupts those birds to keep them from being able to take off, so they won't land. Let's see here. Fred Bingaman. Hi, Fred. John Micklet got a message about this. It appears that an illness is affecting many common species of freshwater turtles in parts of Texas. Well, you beat me to that scoop. I don't know. Now, I haven't heard about that, but now that you've mentioned it, I'll go look it up and see if I can find out, because I really don't know what that is. I do know there are some common bacterial infections, and the times I've actually seen it manifest itself in turtles was when we've had these rock and roll type winters where the temperature goes up, falls down, goes up, falls down. That is really hard on any kind of cold-blooded animal. When you've got extremes where the temperature may be 18 degrees one day and 88 4 days later, and then 32, and then 65, and then, 12, that's really, really hard on cold-blooded animals, especially those. And something else really weird. Have not seen turtles hibernating this year. Typically, turtles will go under the water, kind of shovel down in the mud, and just stay there for a little bit. And when the water warms up, they'll come out. I saw turtles sunning today, and we didn't have any sun. It was a partly cloudy day, although it was a nice day. Willie says, hey, pond boss. Christopher Aguilar, sorry I've been busy with work. I may have missed a few of these shows. Hope I wasn't called a winner. If you were called a winner, you'd hear about it. Let's see, Zach McKenzie, are grass shrimp worth stocking? Depends on how much they cost, if you got the right habitat, if you have a place for them to feed and to eat and to be able to thrive and survive. They're great. Now what they are is they are an appetizer. They're not the backbone of a food chain. They're not any kind of a creature that you can expect to sustain themselves long term unless you've got the right kind of habitat, which here's what that means. Shallow water, peripheral vegetation, dense enough that they can get in it and not be eaten by predator fish. Now, they're predators or anything that will fit in the mouth, which that's a bluegill. A bluegill can eat a little bitty grass shrimp. So I like them. I don't stock them because I don't know of a really good commercial source out there where people can get them on a regular basis at a fair price. I got some stories for you, everybody. I got a call, so I was telling you this a while ago, from Wade Bales. Check out Smart Fish. Check it out. That is a very cool app that you can download on your phone, and when you're out fishing, you can weigh and measure your fish, enter them into your phone on this app. It will plug it into a database. It's $65 a year to be able to join the database where you can keep your data, and it will automatically tell you the relative weight of that largemouth bass. And that right there is instant information that can tell you, should I take this fish, should I not? Let's see here. We got another question. Christopher says, are the baby bass, say 6 months old, slow during feeding at winter? Absolutely. All cold-blooded animals are slow feeding in the winter. Doesn't mean they won't eat. That's why people ice fish. You know, I saw some pictures today of a big bunch of slab bluegills laying on top of the ice with some bass, where a guy caught a bunch in Illinois today, northern Illinois. So, oh great. I'm glad you didn't see that. Jason Nepstad, you're running a little bit late today, buddy. Glad you're here. So anyway, Wade Bales, he had a lady call him from Fort Worth, Texas, and he called me and said, hey, I've gotten this phone call. I'd like for you to get in touch with this lady. So he gave me her email address. So I sent her an email and gave her my phone number and asked her to call. So she did, and come to find out, she her family has bought some land northwest of Fort Worth, Texas, not far from Jacksboro, Texas. And man, they've got a very cool piece of property. So as I was visiting with her, her parents are in their mid-70s, and they bought this piece of property. You know, they've had a business all their lives, and they wanted a place where they could go hunt and fish for their grandkids and even the great-grandkids when they come along, and enjoy it themselves. Well, on this property is a 50-acre lake. And I got to go look at it. Sat down with them. First thing I did was say, you know, tell me your goals. Well, neither the husband nor the wife know how to fish. They have worked their entire lives. So what they want to do is they want to figure out what they can do with this lake to make it the best fishing lake, so they can learn how to fish, and so that the family can come enjoy time on the weekends. And they're up there now every weekend. They bought it a little over a year ago. They have several hundred acres. It's rolling, rocky, beautiful country for deer, good stuff. Chris Chavetta, hey Chris, good to see you, man. Glad you're checking in. Let's see, yeah, Frank's answering the question there. Chad Gillespie, what about the cost of having a professional come check out a new 4 or 4.5 acre pond, give stocking recommendations, testing water and such? I think that's, if you don't mind paying the fee for that, that's a no-fail deal. If you know somebody that's really good at what they do, and they can come out and you can really lay out. I tell you what, I'm going to take you through several stories here. To give you the Cliff's Notes version of this, Chad, is I do think it's worth it, because somebody with eyes like what I've got, you know, other guys like me, we can look at that lake and tell you if you've got the right kind of habitat. Do you have the right amount of habitat? We can send some water in for testing so we can find out the water chemistry, dig into your goals, and help figure out exactly what it is that you want to do. What's your timeline? What's your budget? And then help create that stocking plan that's going to get you from where you are to where you want to go. You know, so yeah, of course, I'm in the business, so I do have that bias, but I also have seen the other side of the coin. I've seen those guys that didn't seek professional help, went to the University of Google and got all the answers they thought they needed, and they call me 4 years later, and they're wondering why it's not like they wanted it to be. Because they missed something along the way and didn't make the best choices to get where they need to go. There's Sean Cole. Sean must not have a gig tonight. Hi, Sean. Glad you're joining us. Danny Tolliver checking in from Bells. Chris Rigoni, will you be doing more podcasts? Love listening while I was working in the woods. Yeah, I'm going to be doing more podcasts. I've got 3 podcasts up, 1 in the can, and I'm working on some more. I got to get the time. And I gotta find the right guys I want to talk to as well, you know, and figure out if I want to do it over the phone or go meet them or whatever we need to do. So anyway, I went and met with these folks. They've got a 50-acre lake, and as we drove around that lake, I wasn't really thinking about the lake. I was thinking about them. I was thinking about how they wanted to enjoy the property. I was thinking about the things that they could do to make it better. I was thinking about, you know, what can they do to have a lot of fun on this lake. So as we talked about it, and I asked them about their goals, they were really pretty simple, because they don't know. You know, and you don't know what you don't know. That's it with all of us. You don't know what you don't know. I don't know what I don't know, but I know this. They didn't know anything about a lake, and I did. So it was up to me to be able to give them enough knowledge so they could start a line of decision-making processes to help them figure out what they wanted to do and then how to do it. I said that really fast, but here's the bottom line. They weren't sure what they wanted. So job 1 was for me to question them a lot and see if I could flush out their goals and then flesh those goals out so we could figure out what they needed to do. So here's what I found. They want, mom and dad in their mid to late 70s would love to be sitting on the back patio on a Saturday evening in May, watching the grandkids and their buddies. The grandkids, by the way, are in their early 20s. Love to see those two guys out there fishing with their buddies, competitively maybe, and have a good night catching bass that may be anywhere from 12 inches to 6 or 7 pounds. And if they catch a 6 or 7 pounder, they're going to be happy about it. So, but the more I dug into it, I wasn't seeing mom and dad smiling a lot. And that's important to me because what I'm trying to do is help somebody's dreams come true. And if they can't really visualize their dreams, I can't figure out how to make them come true. So we kind of had a lull in the conversation on the porch. And I asked the dad, I said, well, you haven't fished much. What do you want to learn to do? He said, I'd really like to learn how to fly fish. I said, okay. Then I pointed down the hill, and they got a boathouse right down there. I said, you see your boathouse right there? And the walkway, the gangplank that goes out to the boathouse. See off to the left? That water's probably 5 to 6 feet deep in the deepest, but it comes up at a slope. What we probably ought to do, and we'll investigate this and tell you whether you should or not, I think it'd be kind of cool if we had a dump truck load of gravel right there, spread out about 4 inches thick, 4 or 5 times as big as a pickup. And that would be a spawning bed for bluegills. And then right there at the end of your boathouse, we can put a feeder up and start feeding Purina's Aquamax fish foods and start growing some really giant bluegills. And then 3 or 4 times a year, they're going to go to those beds and start to spawn. How much? There we go. Now it's back. Good gosh, I don't know what's going on. Networks here. All right, so anyway, that's when I saw him smile, when I was telling him about, maybe with a 5-weight fly rod, you tie into a 3/4 to 1.5 pound bluegill right there beside your dock. He smiled. I knew we were on to something then. So as I talked to him and visited with him about it, I said, what we need to do is we need to come in after the water warms up a little bit and fish start to move shallow. We need to come in and figure out what kind of fish you've got. So we're scheduling them for an electrofishing survey. Now, what the electrofishing survey will do is we'll go out with our electrofishing boat. Anybody that's been following very, very long has seen us doing some electrofishing. Is we go out and try to capture as many fish as we can over a 2-hour period in a lake that big, maybe 4 hours. And then we weigh and measure the game fish and then get a count on the other fish. And we can deduce from the different size classes and ages of the different species of fish compared to their body condition, the status of that fishery. Now, one of the things about this lake is it had drawn down during a drought back in 2013. Then it filled up with the floods in 2015 over here. We had 40 inches of rain in 40 days, and it blew out a bunch of dams in this part of the country. And that dam was one that got blown out. So the dam blew out. And when they bought the property a little over a year ago, they repaired the dam. Now the lake's filled back up, and he's bought a few fish and put in there. But there was about a 3 to 4 acre puddle left that I know there had to be some fish in it when it filled back up in 2017. 2018, because they didn't repair the dam until about a year ago when they first bought the property. So now we got to go in there and see if there's a remnant population of fish or what. And he stocked a few, but not nearly as many as he should have. But he just didn't know. Don't know what you don't know. So that's the story. That's the first story. Billy Bates is here. Craig Guffin checking in. He knows the deal. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Hey, $35 a year right there. There it is. Pond Boss Magazine. $35 a year. Well worth it. Well worth it. I'm going to pick Debbie up at the airport tomorrow night. I know what she's going to want to do. Pick her up at DFW. She's going to want to go to Uncle Buck's at Bass Pro Shops and have supper about 8 o'clock when she gets off that airplane. That's going to cost me $50. 35. Plus, this is jam-packed, full of great information. Susie Nugent. Hi, Susie. Jennifer Royce. Howdy. How are you? So, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Click like. Share this to your timeline. Share the video live. Makes you eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and a mug. It's already 6:50. I got more stories to tell. I got another call from a guy who lives in Austin, Texas, and he's got a pond near Brownwood. And he's a plumber, which I thought was really, really cool. I like what Frank James just said. He said, electrofishing survey is expensive, but ignorance is far more expensive. I know. Well, here, just to kind of reinforce that a little bit, these folks will pay somewhere around $1,500 to have that 50-acre lake evaluated. We'll evaluate habitat, we'll evaluate water chemistry, we'll evaluate the fishery. Then they're going to get a written report based on their goals to give them some ideas, 3 or 4 different options on how to get the lake from where it is to where they want it to be. That's what we're going to do. You know, and they could run out. Just like I told the dad on the shore sitting on the porch, I said, you know what? Good gosh, is Jenny on here? Holy cow, I didn't see Jenny check in. Hello, Jenny. Good gosh, I miss you, girl. Miss all you guys over there in Alabama. I'm gonna come by and see you guys again here before long. But here's the bottom line. He could go spend, I promise you, he could go spend $10,000 on fish and habitat improvements and get nowhere. Not help the lake, not do anything that would be beneficial at all. But what the survey does is gives you a really well-defined starting point to figure out where you are so you can make smart decisions to get you where you want to go. Christopher Aguilar says, I need to come to Louisiana. You know, I've done that. I've been to Louisiana. I've been there a lot. You know, I know where Billy's Boudin is. The next story I want to tell you about is this Governor Brownwood. Now, what's going on over there? It looks like the video quit on my laptop. Pardon me 1 minute. I'm going to see what's going on here because I do not want to miss anything. Looks like our internet may be playing games with us. We'll see. I'll just read it on the phone. Anyway, this guy that has got the place in Brownwood, he's a plumber, got a big plumbing company there in Austin, Texas. And what he did is he bought this hunting ranch not far from Brownwood, Texas, north of Brownwood. And it had about a 2/3 acre pond on it, and he decided he wanted to make it bigger. So during the drought, he brought some heavy equipment in, and he added a whole bunch to that pond, made it a lot bigger. So it's like 4 acres now instead of 2/3 or something. T-Boy's Boudin's better than Billy's? Well, you must know T-Boy. Either that or you are T-Boy, even though your name starts with an A. So anyway, his concern is that he took this pond that had drawn down during the drought, increased its size, it filled up, and he's wondering how well the remaining fish reproduced and filled his pond back up with fish. So what he wants to do is come electrofish it, and he's got a couple of kids that are young, 5 to 8 years old, and he wants them to catch a fish on almost every cast. So the job there is to go see, well, what does he have, and what should we do to help him get his catch rates where they're really high. He doesn't care so much about catching a 4-pound bass as he does, those little bitty kids catching, a half-pound bluegill or a 14-inch bass. He doesn't care about that. He just wants to have big numbers of fish where his kids can have a good time. Now, he's learning how to fish. He's one of these guys that owns his own business, just like the folks I was just telling you about earlier. And he's never taken the time to learn, but he knows he's got to get his kids in the outdoors. And all of us do. We got to get our kids in the outdoors. And so what he did was went and bought several hundred acres, has deer, turkey. That's a great area for turkeys. And he's getting his kids out in the woods. So he wants them to catch a few fish. So all we got to do there is go spend probably 45 minutes with the electrofishing boat. The water's a little muddy. He wants to figure out how we can clear the water up and get his catch rates up. So again, we'll go figure out what kind of fishery he's got, and then if we need to modify it, we'll modify it. There's Todd Austin, Brent Olson, Colby Olson. Let's see, he's talking to Colby, tagging us. Hey, tag up, buddy. Tag, you're it. Tell Colby he needs to watch us. You know what? Tell Colby I called him out for not watching. He needs to be watching this. Another story. I got a call yesterday. Now, this was pretty interesting. This guy found me on my BobLuskOutdoors.com website. And if you haven't looked at that, I've got totally different information on the Bob Lusk Outdoors website than I do on the Pond Boss website. because I'm kind of chasing business on the Bob Lusk Outdoors. On the pondboss.com website, I'm wanting to provide more information and then refer you to the best people out there wherever you are. So this guy found me on the bobluskoutdoors.com website, and he sent me an email, the info@bobluskoutdoors.com, and his question was, I'm thinking about building a lake. I've had the NRCS out here, and what do I need to do next? Well, he included his phone number, so I just called him. I said, hey, and he lives in Tulsa, and he's an attorney that lives in Tulsa who has got a pretty high-stress job. So what he wanted to do is he's bought several hundred acres southwest of Tulsa, got a pretty good creek running through it with 3 or 4 branches of that creek all coming together on his property. So what he wanted to do is look at the prospects of building a lake. So he went to the NRCS office there in the county seat, and I think it's Okmulgee maybe, and they got on their topo maps and started looking at it and figured out that he could build a 13 to 15 acre lake. So he said, I don't know how to do this. I've never done it. And so I started getting online and looking around, and your name kept popping up, so I thought I'd get in touch with you. What's the process? So what he wanted to know was the process. And actually, one of the first things he said, I see John Wilson clicking like on the video. Attaboy, John. Eric Avery. Good to see you, Eric. I know I miss people because I miss people every week. I go back and look, and they don't show up on my feed until I go back and look after I'm all done. So if I miss you, I apologize. It ain't on purpose. I'm doing the best I can here to find everybody. So anyway, he said, what's the process? And let's talk about fish. And so in my mind, that's kind of a conflict. You can't really talk about fish until you get to that point in the process. But that's what he really wants to do, is he wants to figure out what process he needs to go through to build this lake and do it efficiently and most cost effectively. Jim Liner, Uncle Bob, we have our charity tournament, Hooks for Hope, set up for April the 13th. I will contact you about more info. We have a bunch of big name sponsors set up to help. Yeah, Jim, call me. Let me know. I would really like to know about that. If I can help promote it, I don't know what I can do, but I'll tell you this. I will do what I can do to help you promote that in whatever ways. I know some big name guys, but that might not be what you want. You might need some folks that watch this show that can write a pretty decent check to go fishing on Ray Scott's lake or whatever you're doing. Tell me about it, and I'll help you promote it and get some people involved in it if I can. So anyway, talking to this attorney from Tulsa, he wanted to start talking about fish, which, that's the exciting part for guys that have a dream or have a vision. So as I was talking to him, I gave him some answers about bass and bluegill and red ear and fathead minnows and crappie and catfish and all that kind of stuff that he was asking me. But here's where we really had to drill down. Here's your take-home points for this stuff here. His process is this. For a 13-acre lake, now listen to me, a 13-acre lake, he could spend as little as $60,000 or as much as $600,000. And it all lies in the due diligence. Okay, now take that home. I've seen guys spend way too much money, and I've seen guys spend way too little money to not get where they needed to go. So here's the process that I told him. Here's his first homework, and we'll have another conversation here probably in another 2 weeks. He went to the NRCS office, Natural Resources Conservation Service, which is a branch of the USDA. And part of their role, especially in rural parts of the country, part of their role is to help look at watershed management and conservation. To that end, in some places, they'll help design a dam, they'll help place a dam, they'll help figure out where it needs to be, to tell you how big the watershed is, and look at the soil surveys to give you an idea if you have the right kinds of soils that would make a good dam. So what I told him, what I drove home to him was his homework. Find out how big the watershed is. Now, if anybody's taking notes, here's what you need to know. 1 acre, 1 inch deep is 27,000 gallons of water. So what I told him is measure your watershed. And from the size of your watershed, you can calculate roughly the volume of water that you would get from runoff during an average year. Whatever average means now. That part of the planet they get between 35 and 45 inches of rain per year, and over 2/3 of that runs off. So we can calculate fairly closely, at least reasonably close enough, how much water you can expect through the course of a normal year to coming down that watershed into that creek where he wants to build a dam. That's going to tell you how big the dam should be. So I told him to do that first. I said, then the second thing with the NRCS is have them help you site where the dam should be. Now you want to build a dam that's the shortest possible vertically, the shortest possible laterally, and moving the least amount of dirt as possible because that costs less. But the dam is going to be created, designed, engineered for that particular site. Now, when earth movers start getting ready to bid a job, they're going to bid it pretty much based on the cubic yards of dirt and how far the dirt has to be moved. And these days and times, earth moving costs somewhere between $3.50 and $4 per cubic yard, give or take, depending on just where in the heck you are. So what I told him to do is to work with them to help them engineer the dam. Now, here's the part of the story that's real important. You got to keep in mind when you're working to design a lake, you have two real fundamental jobs. Job number one is to design a dam. That's a structure, just like a skyscraper. You got to have the right foundation. You got to have the right materials. You got to build it properly. You know, and the dam's job it's very, very distinct. The dam's job is to impound water and then release excess water in an orderly fashion. So the NRCS, as engineers, they're pretty good at that. You know, they're really, really good at figuring out how much water to expect to come into that site. Therefore, this is how big the dam needs to be. Therefore, this is how big the spillway needs to be. Now, the second part of lake design is that part behind the dam, which is that living, breathing entity that we call a lake. And that's when I told Mr. Attorney, that's really where you need me. Because what I can do is based on your goals of having a fun bass fishing lake, is I'm one of the guys around the country that can help design a lake with the right kind of habitat, structure, and cover that's excellent for the fish as well as the angler. So, so one of my take-home point for him yesterday when we talked was we need to design what your fish need to be able to reproduce, to be able to hide, loaf, travel, ambush, feed. So we need to figure all those elements out for your lake and not do too little and not do too much. Plus, we got to think about when you've had the hardest day in court you could possibly have, at the end of the day, whether you win or lose, you got a pretty high level of stress and you've got to relax those shoulder muscles and you got to do something. And you could drive 35 minutes to your place, climb in a boat, and you don't need to guess where you need to go to fish. If we can create in a 13 or 14 acre lake, 15 acre lake, about 10 hot spots, you can go hit those 10 hot spots within an hour, hour and a half, be back on the porch watching the sun go down, having your favorite beverage at the end of the day. He was so excited when we hung up, he couldn't wait to go do his homework. So that's his homework. Figure out the best place to put a dam. How big does it need to be? Now, the second part of his homework, when we start talking again, is now we're going to go out and see what kind of dirt you got. Do we have any? Do we have any dirt? Do we have any clay? Is it all rocky? Can we build a dam there? And once we figure that out, then we start actually getting into seeking bids and designing habitat and designing structure. That's when it really gets fun. So the next job he'll have after the dam is pretty much designed, you figure out where the shoreline is going to be. Where's the elevation of the lake going to be? And that part of the plan, is it going to be at 762 feet above sea level? If it is, let's start setting some flags at 762. See what the lake's going to be shaped like. Then we start looking to decide what we're going to do above the water line and below the water line. And that's when it really gets fun. Let's see. Bill Corder says, I just bought some property in South Cadillac last fall with a 1 acre pond. How do I begin assessing the fishery? I have fished it a few times and I've caught a few small bass and some decent bluegill and red-eared sunfish. I see lots of minnows. Creeping water primrose surrounds the perimeter of the pond. Okay, Bill, I'll tell you what you need to do. Start weighing and measuring some of those largemouth bass. Compare those to the standard charts that you see in Pond Boss magazine that you see online. I've got a spreadsheet. Send me an email. Just send me an email at info@pondboss.com. Tell me you want to see the spreadsheet. I'll send it to you. You plug in the lengths and weights of your bass, compare them to the standard curve. We're going to figure out are your bass underweight or overweight. So we're going to figure out are your bass crowded, are they balanced, are they overweight? From that, you can begin to make some decisions. Fish for some bluegills, measure them. Catch some of those minnows, catch them in a trap, catch them in a seine. Now let it warm up a little bit before I got out there with a seine. But if you can trap some and identify those minnows you're calling minnows, they might be gambusia, they might be topwater minnows, they might be shiners, they might be baby bluegills, they might be baby red ear. But if you can find out how well your sunfish are spawning and how well they're surviving compared to the body condition of your bass, then you can begin to figure out the status of your fishery. Here's a perfect example. This is what's normal. What's normal is that you in a 1 acre pond may go fishing and catch 25 bass. They're all cookie cutter, carbon copy, same length, same weight, and they're all 20% underweight. No bait fish other than the biggest bluegill you can catch, and they're kind of thin. That's going to tell you something, that your bass crowded. And if your bass crowded, then the answer is to start culling some bass, set up a feeder, start feeding your bluegills, feed Aquamax MVP for bluegills, get a Texas Hunter feeder. If you need help with that, let me know. I'll help you get one. And then get your productivity up. Productivity up with feed, get your overcrowded bass down, but job one is start assessing. Start getting yourself some data. Steve Stupa, I hope I'm saying that right. I got your email today. Haven't had time to respond to it, but I have read it, and I've looked at your addendums. Very good detail, man. Mark Dauber from Montgomery, Alabama, just up the road from our buddy Jim Liner, who's been on here this evening. Clint Loveday, hi. Morgan Tyler with Purina Mills, hi, Morgan. Morgan is a wildlife expert. If you guys want to know anything about feeding wildlife, Morgan Tyler is the guy. And if you want to get in touch with him, send me an email. I will connect you up. If you're, I don't know, he works with Scott Hohensee. Those two guys probably know more about feeding deer and other wildlife as anybody I've ever met. Now, that's their business. They're good at it. So if you want to talk to him, let me know. Send me an email, Bob Lusk, send it to info@pondboss.com. I'll see it before then, or I'll see it then. Okay, the next story I got for you is, oh my gosh, you're going to love this. I got an email from a lady that lives in San Francisco. This is a cool story. This lady lives in San Francisco. She is in her mid-50s, and she's a retired veterinarian, and she grew up on a farm. Hey, Marcos de Jesus. Marcos de Jesus is one of the premier fisheries biologists for the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. And I'm going to tell you, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department does an outstanding job in the waters of the state of Texas, and Marcus is charged with some pretty important lakes and ponds, and well, he's got all the lakes around Austin, so he's constantly on the go to figure out some things that he can do. I mean, you take a lake like LBJ, that's really not a lake, it's a river. It flooded last year. So now he gets to deal with the aftermath of that. So my hat's off to Marcos, and I'm flattered that you joined us here. Glad you're here. Bill Russell, hi Bob. How old, I guess maybe you mean bass. How old do bass have to be to spawn? Is that what you're asking? How often do they spawn? I stocked 4-inch bass yesterday, 9 inches. If a bass is 9 inches long, it can reproduce. I've seen bass that we stocked at 2 inches long in the spring, even just 9 inches long the next spring, spawning. I'd rather them be bigger, but there you go. That's the answer. Now, this lady from San Francisco, you're going to love this story. She sent me an email at the BobLuskOutdoors.com website, and she'd been reading through it, and her question was, I have just bought a piece of property that's about 350 acres in northern Nevada that I want to retire to, and it's got several hot springs on it. The hottest spring is 160 degrees, and the coolest one is 100 degrees. I would like to figure out how to build a horseshoe-shaped pond about 2 acres and build a floating house on it that I can move based on the temperature of the pond. How cool is that? So I thought, I can type up a bunch of stuff, but we just need to have a conversation. So I just emailed her back, said, let me have your phone number. What time is a good time to call? And I just called her. Now, it was really interesting being a guy from Texas talking to a retired veterinarian from San Francisco, and her whole thing is she likes to soak in the water. So part of what she wants to do with her floating house is have a way she can raise a lid up in the floor and sit in the water and soak in there like a hot tub. So she wants to be able to move this house through the course of the year to figure out how to find the optimum temperature right around 100 degrees, maybe a little bit under, so that she can have water. And then she also likes to pump the water up into a kind of a stock tank, or I guess it's some kind of a hot tub kind of a deal, where she can soak in the water, which I thought that was pretty cool. So now so what she wants to do is she wants to figure out how to channel those springs. And by the way, there used to be a resort there up until the late 50s, and it burned to the ground. And it's just been fallow since then, and all these springs have just been flowing down, hitting the canal and going down the river somewhere. And so what she wants to do is to figure out how to harness the water, channel it, and be able to control the temperatures, and then enjoy the heck out of it. And by the way, are there any fish I can put in that pond? So my answer to her was, well, we really need to do some homework. And part of the homework we need to do is if you're going to build a lake or a pond, you need to figure out where's the best place to put it. What kind of soils do you have? How are we going to channel the springs until you get the pond built? And can we funnel some of that 160-degree water in when we want it? Maybe not when we don't. So there's some engineering there that's going to be really, really fun. I don't know if I'm going to tackle that or not, because it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. However, it's interesting enough that I might just pursue it just for fun. It might be fun to go up there and do something I've never done. So that's the kind of stuff I get. Let's see, what else do I have? Oh, here's another one. I got a call from a young guy day before yesterday. His family has just bought some land. They have had deer leases their entire lives. They've had deer leases in South Texas and Central Texas. Well, they found, and now they live in, now he lives in Houston, and he's in law school, and he's in his 20s. And his family, mom and dad, are just busy working their tails off in Beaumont, Texas. So their weekend time is very valuable as a family, and he's got a couple of brothers. So the family got together. They came across a piece of property in Central Texas, kind of northwest of Waco, Texas a little bit, and it's got about a 4-acre pond on it. So they said, as a family, we were talking about it about a month ago, and we decided that we could all kick in a little bit of money. And I asked him, how much money does a law student have? And so he says, we could all kick in a little bit of money, and we could go buy some fish. But I told him, you know what, let me do some homework first. So as we started talking, I asked him, I said, when you go out, he said, we're thinking about buying about $4,000 worth of little bluegill about this big. Is that a smart thing to do? I said, well, have you fished it? He said, yeah, we fished it quite a bit. I said, what are you catching? He said, oh my gosh, we catch anywhere from 12-inch to 5-pound bass. So I said, then it's not a good idea to put $4,000 worth of bluegill in there, especially little bitty babies. Are those bass chunky? He said, well, some of them are, some of them aren't. So guess what I told him? Yeah, we need to do an electrofishing survey, and from that, we can devise a game plan. So here's the kind of the pattern where I'm going. When you get ready to do something with your pond, there's a thought process you need to go through. The attorney in Tulsa, he needs to figure out how to design the proper dam on the right size watershed. What kind of dirt he needs, does he have it, and then start to figure out how much will it cost to move the dirt to build the dam. Before it ever happens, and here's a comment I made to him that's real important to every one of you in here. Before anybody ever hires a bulldozer, the minute that bulldozer, track hoe, loader, whatever, moves some dirt, it's changed that environment and changed that ecosystem for 5 generations past you. That's a big deal, folks. So you really, really need to think it through before you do it. Because, I don't know if you can name your great-great-great-grandparents. I can't. Much less figure out what did they do. Because I'm going to tell you, your great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, or somebody else's great-great-grandchildren are going to see the results of what you did now. So one of the things I told the attorney is take some time to figure out what you need to do, then project how much it's going to cost, and then decide whether or not you should take the next steps. The next steps would be, now we go in and we design the very best lake we can do. Now, everybody else that's got a pond, you can't really decide what to do about it until you assess. I love the question earlier, what do I need to do to assess my pond? Another thing to do to assess that pond is check the water chemistry. Now, if you've got bass and bluegill and redder growing in it, your water's probably fine. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't check it. I think it's good to have a reference point. Now, of course, it's easy for me to say that because when you get the results of that lab test, unless you're a chemist or a biologist, you're not going to know what it means. But you can ask guys like me, and we'll tell you what it means. Let's see. I'm going to hit a story here. A question. Frank James, my body of water tends to be bass crowded. Once they hit 15 inches, they get very fat, but are skinny up to 14 inches. Will cormorants tend to take smaller largemouth bass, or will they target largemouth bass or bluegill that I want as forage? Well, I'll tell you this, Frank. I read several things into that question to answer it, so I'm going to answer the question directly first. The biggest bass I've seen a cormorant take was 15 inches and weighed 1 pound, 7 ounces. But I've seen them attack bigger fish but can't eat them. And I know they attack them because they leave scars. They leave sores and rips and things on those bigger bass. But if you've got skinny bass, they're 14 inches, but your 15-inch bass are not, that tells me that the gape size, the mouth size of those 15-inch bass fit your food chain better than the 14-inch bass. So some of those 14-inch bass need to be cold, it sounds like to me. Sean Cole, thinking of adding some structure, cedar trees in my bass and bluegill pond by putting some brush piles on the ice. That's a great idea. I'll be able to, now Sean lives Lincoln, Nebraska, everybody. And he's a musician. Hey, I don't know if you guys ever need a gig, but man, this guy's a great musician. And his rates are reasonable. He makes a living doing that, and there's a plug for you, Sean Cole, but here's your answer. You'll be able to keep the pile in place that you want to drop. What depth of water would you suggest putting the tree pile? I would put a tree pile, to kind of quantify that for everybody. If you can build an oak pile, and I tell you what, if you can make them stand up, that's even better. And while you've got ice, man, I'd be tempted to go ahead and spend a little bit of money, buy some buckets, even if they're only 2.5-gallon buckets that you can get from a food service house somewhere, pickle buckets, and set the trunk of the tree in it and concrete them in and set them on the ice, because when they fall through the ice, they'll be standing up. If you can put a cedar tree that's 7 feet tall and 8 feet of water, that's great. The needles are going to go away pretty fast. Then the little bitty limbs are going to go away, but if you can keep that tree standing up, it'll last 3 to 5 years. If it falls down in a pile, that whole pile will sink and collapse within about 3 years. But how deep of water? I like to put them in about 8 feet of water and make the brush piles. If you can make them 6 to 8 feet square and 8 feet tall, you're going to end up with a pile that's 8 feet square and probably 4 feet tall by the time it settles in. That can hold some pretty big bluegills, or pretty small bluegills to a lot of numbers of bluegills. That's how I would look at that. Let's see. Here's another pretty cool story. Let me see here. I'm looking at a list. Here's one you're going to enjoy the heck out of. I've got the guy that's going to be a client. Matter of fact, he watches this show sometimes. I'm not going to name him because it needs to be proprietary, because he hasn't gotten what he wants yet. But part of my role with him is to help him make some decisions on whether should I buy this ranch or not. So he's looking at me to help evaluate and give a value to the lakes and ponds. And he's got a very cool mission. He wants to help disabled people and others that are underprivileged to be able to get outdoors and enjoy hunting and fishing. So part of my role with him is, once he finds a tract of land, then I offer my first line of opinions as to what he can do with those lakes and ponds, or is there a place to build a lake or a pond? And if there is, then he'll take the next step. And he's actually tied up a piece of property, then decided that wasn't the one he wanted, and he's looking at one now that's east of Dallas that's got some really nice lakes on it and could be the property. So my role there, his due diligence is, he doesn't want to buy a piece of property that would cost too much to improve, or that would not fit the real specific role that he's got set aside, which means helping underprivileged people and his family enjoy the outdoors. So that's his gift, and that's his gist. So now I'm looking at those lakes and ponds. Not only can they be good fishing lakes, but can they be accessed? And how can guys enjoy them? And how can we concentrate fish to where there's a bunch of, in most lakes, 90% of the fish live in 10% of the water. So in these bodies of water, is there too little or too much habitat? What would it take to be able to concentrate fish in areas where when he takes somebody out on a boat in a wheelchair locked down, where they could catch a few fish? So that's part of what we're looking at. Hi, Brad Rom. Good to see you. Glad you made it, buddy. So that's a whole different story. Now I'm going to tell you one more story that I'm cutting out of here. Michael Gray's checking in. Let's see, Michael got off the bulldozer late tonight. You got to make hay when it's raining in the Nashville, Tennessee area. There's a fishing club over southeast of Memphis, Tennessee, and I love these guys. These guys have grown up together, went to school together. They're all in different businesses, and they all have daughters. So they made a pact that they wanted to buy some land that could be a hunting and fishing club where they could get their daughters out to be able to shoot, gut deer, catch fish, cook, get them out in the country. Well, this property they bought got about a 25-acre lake on it, and they went out and started fishing, and all they could catch was a bunch of little dink 6 to 8 inch bass. So they got to thinking about it, and they read everything they could find on the University Google. They found me finally, and they said, okay, we're a little bit worried that we can make these bass grow. And the food chain's not very good. We don't think it was stocked well. Some of these bass have got to be 6 years old. They're not any bigger than about 10 inches. So what can we do to make these fish grow, or what are our choices? So we got a few fish, and we started looking at them and thought, you know what, these 9-inch bass, 9 to 10-inch bass, they've got to be at least 3 years old. Well, they've lost their growth potential. Even if we could figure out how to ramp up the food chain, get the water fertile, add some feeders, start feeding some MVP or Aquamax 600, whatever we could choose, it would take so long to rebuild the food chain. And by the time we did, those bass would be 5 years old, and they'd top out at 2 pounds. Well, they've already got one lake that's on the property on the other side where they can catch fish all day long that are 2 to 3 pounds. So we got our heads together. They invited me over. I went over there. We cooked some steaks, or they cooked some steaks. Those guys know some pretty good wine too, by the way. And we just enjoyed each other's company, and we brainstormed around the table, and they just grilled me with questions. And the conclusion that they came to with me is, you know what? Why don't we draw the lake down about 7 or 8 feet, and then let's rotenone it, kill the fish, and start over. That's a 25-acre lake. And so they said, what would that cost? And I told them, and 3 of them fell out of their chair, and 1 more went and poured another drink. But they said, you know what? It makes sense to do that. And I said, for every foot of water you can drop off of the lake, that'll save you $4,000 in rotenone. So they were motivated to drop the lake, which they did. And then we went in November, and we rotenone the lake. And now, here's something I learned. If I'm going to rotenone a lake, use rotenone and take out the fish, typically I like to do that in the hottest part of the summer because it kills the fish fast. Then you come right back up behind them and stock it. Well, we didn't do it until November. And we checked oxygen top to bottom of the lake. It was flush with oxygen top to bottom, same temperature top to bottom. We worked with our rotenone supplier, Kelly Duffy, who I've mentioned on these broadcasts before, works with Helena. And Kelly had designed a device that he let us borrow that allowed us to monitor the volume of rotenone that we're putting out with a meter. And then we were able to put it out in different levels of the water column, starting at the bottom, coming up. So we got a really good distribution of rotenone, and rotenone lasts a lot longer in cold water, which hadn't really thought about that before because I was kind of ingrained in my mind to do it in the summertime. Well, that rotenone lasted over 8 weeks. There's not a fish alive in that lake. It took over 8 weeks for that rotenone to dissipate enough that we can restock it with fish. So now we're coming back in with about 1,500 bluegill per acre. I think 250 red ear per acre. We're putting in 450 pounds of fathead minnows, I think it is, in this 25-acre lake. So we're going to build the food chain early on. Then we've asked American Sport Fish Hatchery to supply, some of the bait fish as well as some of the largemouth bass. So we're going to be restocking with F1 tiger bass as well as some pure strain Florida bass because they want to grow some huge fish there. While the lake was drawn down 8 feet, they got a bobcat in there. They built some humps in shallow water. They added a bunch of brush. They cut some trees. They probably added 35 or 40 different pieces of habitat into that lake. I tell you what they did. One of the guys is in the manufacturing business, and he got a bunch of pallets. So they bought some T-posts and took those pallets and put them out in water that's going to be about 5 feet deep when the lake fills back up, and drove some T-posts in, and then put the pallets over the T-posts and wired them down onto the T-posts. So they built a bunch of really, really, really cool structure out there. So now there's kind of oh good gosh, when the pipe turns up, you know what I'm talking about, where the water overflows? Well, that thing's kind of rotted, so now they're trying to replace that, and it keeps raining. But once they replace that pipe, the lake's got another 4 feet to go before it's full again. And so we got fish coming in March, and they're going to be ready to go. So it would have taken, the decision there was it would have taken at least 2 years to unpickle the pickle in that lake with not much upside potential for the existing overcrowded bass. It would be their babies that would stand a chance to get bigger, and we didn't know the genetics, and they didn't want to spend the time or the money to figure it out. So in that case, it made good sense to rope note, so they did a cash call. Everybody wrote a pretty good little check, and they knocked it out. And that was a smart move. And we'll tell here in 3 or 4 years, if they're catching some big bass, just how smart it was. Chuck Brinkman, I've been feeding Aquamax since I stocked my pond. Bass are 1.5 after 10 months. Just continuing to feed them, increase their overall growth potential. Absolutely right, it does. It does, because what it does is that, a bass by nature is going to feed 2 or 3 or 4 times a day in warmer weather. So it's got to go hunt that prey and eat it. And this fish food is free. It's going to eat whenever it can, whenever the feeder goes off. So yeah, it does increase the upside growth potential. One thing I have seen though, is the bass get biggest when you're feeding bluegill as well. So if you've got a good forage fish base that the bass can feed on when the feeder's not going off, that's when you're going to get your best upside potential. Eric Avery says, do you have a preferred dissolved oxygen meter? YSI 500, yes. YSI. I think they've got several. There's a YSI 100, 300, 500. I think we have a 500. Dave Weber, great question. Did you find any bigger fish when you killed out that 25-acre? Yeah, let me tell you what we found. We saw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those 7 to 9 inch to 10 inch bass. We found 4, count them, 4 largemouth bass that were 4 to 8 pounds. We we killed probably 40 25 plus pound grass carp and some channel catfish that were knocking on the door of 12 and 13 pounds. We saw some crappie, which we were told there weren't any crappie in there, but there were. And they were all black crappie, so they had to have been stocked. They didn't come from the watershed. But we only saw 4 big bass over that entire lake. Now, keep in mind, the water was cold when we did it in November. We killed the fish. It took all day long, one day on a Sunday. We did it on a Sunday. And then I went out and looked at the lake on Monday before we headed back to Texas. But the caretaker told me there were several more big bass that floated up, but it wasn't maybe 6 or 7 more. But fish were dying over a period of 5 or 6 days in that lake. But I can pretty well tell you there weren't more than 15 big bass in that whole 25-acre lake. Holy cow, we're at the end of the show already. My gosh, I talk a lot, and you listen a lot. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Don't forget, hashtag Pond Balls Magazine. $35 a year. If you don't subscribe to the magazine, please do that. That's the economy that helps fund this. That and sponsorships from Purina and Texas Hunter. And I appreciate those sponsorships very, very much. So until next week, next Wednesday, I don't know where I'm going to be. And I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I didn't know what I was going to talk about until about 20 minutes before I showed up. And producer started typing some stuff in and said, yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. I said, okay, here we go. So thanks for joining me. We will see you again next Wednesday. Check it out, pondballs.com. We appreciate you guys. Adios.